All right, good morning, Doug. We're back today with questions from members of the file. That's our private member group. You can find out more about it by going to crisisinvesting.com. Essentially, subscribe to the newsletter and you can join our private group for free. So, what we typically did for weeks and weeks, months and months, actually, is get questions from members of the file. We haven't done this in a while, so I solicited some, and we got a whole bunch of good ones today. Let me just jump into them. The first one is about gold. I mean, gold is start to see new highs here happening. But they ask if you have any insights or suspicions of the recent move up in gold to a new all-time high. Is it more central banks buying? And also there's the issue of the LMBA and COMEX. And, like apparently in London, they're running out of physical gold. And what's really going on there?
Yeah, well, with things of this nature, all any of us really know is what's reported. And is that really reliable? But I think with gold crowding a new all-time high, which it is, it's moving towards very close to a new all-time high. Yeah, there could be a real run into physical gold at this point because most of the financial people in the world don't believe in gold. They think what Warren Buffett thinks, that it's a pet rock, that it's an anachronism. It's basically useless and foolish. Okay. So it's quite possible that there are large short positions that the conventional financial world has put on. And buying from central banks, I mean, look, if you run a central bank, you have to have some assets. Whether you're not backing your currency with anything, because they don't back the currency with anything still, but central banks have to have assets. So what are those assets? Well, they're basically other countries' fiat currencies, primarily the US dollar at this point. But that doesn't make any sense. So the world has, in fact, been going back to gold. The Chinese, it's said, and probably correctly, are the largest producers of gold in the world. But not only are they the largest producers, but they're very big importers as well. And you go to China, and there are gold shops all over the place. And the Chinese government appears to be encouraging the average Chinese citizen to own gold. So you add that up, the fact that not just the Chinese central bank wants to hold the gold as an asset, but the average Chinese person has been encouraged to buy and hold gold. Other central banks don't want to hold the dollar. They saw what happened to the Russians. It could happen to anybody for God knows what reasons. The average financial manager person in the West is anti-gold, probably short gold, if he's anything, for lots of reasons. So yeah, there could be a real short squeeze in gold, even though gold right now is at a reasonable level. Compared to everything else, it's no longer a high potential speculation. It doesn't mean it won't explode and go higher. This is a short squeeze, as there's a panic. But relative to houses and cars and clothes and restaurant meals and just everything, gold is about where it should be and historically has been back in the old days. So I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, I think it does. It's really kind of, except we don't really know exactly what's going on. We see news reports of like that the LMBA is having to borrow gold from the Bank of England, and that the Bank of England, which normally fulfills that borrowing when that happens within 4 days, now has increased it to like between 4 and 8 weeks. It shows there's a real scramble. There's a huge amount of gold that's moved into the United States. And so something's going on in that market, which has basically been dominated by paper trading mostly, right, for years and years and years.
Yeah.
So might be finally having that moment or getting close to it where the race is on to actually have the stuff in your possession, where people want to actually have real collateral. And you said central banks are buying. It's not just the Chinese central bank, like the Bank of Poland, India, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Jordan, Turkey, Czech, Ghana, even, they recently have been buying gold. So it seems like they get it. And apparently the Treasury Secretary nominee, I don't think he's yet been confirmed, Scott
Oh,
Bessent,
Bessem. Is it Bessem or Bessent?
Bessent, Bessent. So he apparently is a big gold guy, and his fund, I think I read this right, that gold is one of his largest positions.
Yes, and he's individually a billionaire, and his largest position personally, I think I've seen him say, is gold. So this all augurs well. And at some point, some people might decide to just take delivery of their contracts on the COMEX, and people are going to have to come up with the gold against delivery. Yeah, so there could be a short squeeze and we could find gold exploding, which is wonderful. But since I just treat gold as savings, as an asset, a holding, never sell it or part with it or trade it, I'm mainly interested in what it's going to do to the gold stocks, and not really any action there yet, but maybe that's going to change radically.
It seems like it should, given the fact that the gold price is up about 40% in the last year. That's a big move, it seems to me.
Yeah, and the gold companies that are in production, almost all of them are coining money at this point.
Literally.
Yeah. Yeah. So finally, we're going to have our day in the sun.
All
I
right.
think.
Well, I can't wait.
I can't wait either. But then we come to a more cosmic problem is, okay, we all got enough money, got enough houses, got enough cars, got enough clothes, got enough everything. Well, I've come to hate traveling, but maybe I'll fly private all the time instead. Okay, I'll feel like I owe it to myself. But what else? What other difference is it going to make? In other words, you reach a certain amount of money, and do you really need any more? I mean, really, frankly, you
Yeah.
can't buy any more shit. I mean, you can fill a garage full of Ferraris, but okay, so what? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not a kid
More money,
anymore.
more problems. Really.
That stuff doesn't really do it for me anymore, frankly.
Yeah.
Entirely apart from the fact that there's no place on the roads that you dare drive a car anywhere near to what you used to be able to, better not anymore. So how much money do you need?
It's different for everybody, but it's important to figure that out because I see people sometimes lose track of why they're busting their ass. They work really hard to become financially successful and then they keep doing it at the expense of other things and don't realize like they never really recalibrated what they're trying to accomplish. That's a big mistake.
Yeah. And say, well, I want to do good for others, but I want to give money to charity, but giving money to a charity is, I think, a huge mistake for all kinds of reasons that we could talk about a separate time. I've always thought, well, if I had a few $1 billion to spare, I would use it to take over a small, bedraggled country. That would change the course of maybe history. Oh, there's things you can do, but is it really worth the trouble? Frankly, I don't know.
I think taking over countries is a young man's game, Doug.
It is yeah, it's exciting and all that, and anyway, I've kind of been there and done that. Truth be known, not successfully, I must add, but
Yeah. All right. So next question is, yes, if either of us have read The Fourth Turning or Alvin Tolfer's books, Future Shock and Third Wave, and if you have, what do you think of them? And do any of them accurately predict what's going on in the world now?
I read Future Stock many, many years ago when it came out. I think it was about 1970, a long time ago, a lifetime ago. And it was just a projection. I thought that things are going to change. What I remember from it is things are going to be changing rapidly and radically. So it was a good prediction. I don't know what you could do with that prediction, but it was good to know. Do you remember? Did you read it?
I never read that one. No, I mean, it was published before I was born. So like you said, a lifetime ago.
Yeah. Anyway, I've long held that the best predictor of the future is science fiction, good science fiction books. So rather than having a futurist tell us what's going to happen, just read a lot of sci-fi.
Yeah, I do think that the fourth turning, the good part, I do think that is useful. I read it originally. I think it was recommended by your newsletter business, back in the early to or the mid 2000s, late 2000s, and I read it then. But then I reread it in 2020, and the way it describes the social upheaval and kind of where all of a sudden within society, everyone is willing to accept radical changes to everything. They're willing to accept and actually they embrace these things. Boy, that seems more, I mean, it seems so true today with what we're seeing. I mean, before Trump and with Biden, it seemed that way. And it even COVID, now it seems
Yeah, those guys really made a breakthrough with that book. I mean, notwithstanding what I just said about sci-fi, what those guys did is instead of looking at history, everybody says, well, it's a pendulum. You go liberal, conservative, back and forth. Okay, true enough. But they have a, a four-stage pendulum, which is actually more true that if the average person lives about 80 years and a generation's about 20 years, you can divide it into four. And yeah, the conclusions they came up with pretty much rhyme with history, pretty much. Therefore, you can use it predictively, and the predictions that they've made so far are pretty much spot on, pretty much. So everybody
yeah.
should read that book. They should read, I think, what was the first one? The first one was called Generations, and
Yeah.
that was very good. And I reviewed it very early in the newsletter. Thought it was great. And The Fourth Turning, great also. And I'd have one of the guys has died. And who's the other one that's still alive?
Neil Howe is the one who's still
Neil Howe,
alive.
yeah. Because I'd talked to the guy that died, the other author, before that, and I've never talked
Strauss.
personally. Who?
William Strauss, I think.
Yeah, Strauss. But I haven't read their or Strauss or Howe's latest book. I don't know if you've done that or not.
I did, and I didn't. It kind of made me think that his partner was the real intellectual heavyweight in their duo, honestly.
Yeah, maybe. And maybe it's a lot like movies where the sequel doesn't quite have what the original did. The original
Yeah,
is always the greatest, generally speaking, and everything.
yeah.
Anyway, should read the first two books anyway, I think, because they are good and they're unique and original. I think original.
Doug, someone asks if you're a fan of, or if you were a fan of David Lynch.
Yeah. Well, which one of his, he's a famous guy, and I'm a movie buff, but, he died at age 78, which I found kind of eerie because I'm 78. Gee, that's not good. Also, uh, when we were talking earlier, Marianne Faithfull, the rock singer what was she most famous for? Two things: having been Mick Jagger's girlfriend for 2 years, and then winding up on the street living rough in London and making a comeback. And I guess her most famous song is Wild Horses. Anyway, she died too at 78. I hope that's not indicative that that's an age when people kick the bucket.
So
Anyway,
yeah, are you a fan? I mean, do you know much of his work?
uh, Mulholland Drive I thought it was very good film noir in a modern context in LA. I thought it was quite good, Mulholland Drive, but I don't recall seeing another one of his movies as famous as he is. And despite the fact I'm a movie buff. How about you?
Well, I looked through the list before the call, and there's I remember in high school I watched Twin Peaks, the series, which was interesting and certainly was the rage, among my friend group in high school, at least especially the girls. Like they every week they'd get together and watch it. And I thought that was pretty good. It was weird. Um, all of his stuff's a little bit offbeat, kind of dark. And then the other one that I saw that I didn't realize he did was Elephant Man, which I saw when I was a little kid. And that was disturbing to me as a little kid, though. It was very disturbing.
Yeah, understandably. I saw it many years ago when it first came out. And I remember it's not like being a cosmic breakthrough, but depressing, just
Yeah,
just depressing.
felt
So
terrible for the guy.
sad.
Yeah, exactly. All
Anyway,
right. I mean, he did a good job of his personal branding is bigger than his body of work, you know?
as is often the case, actually. A couple good movies anyway. And I think I watched one or two episodes of Twin Peaks, whatever. This was in the days before VCR and all that even.
It
And
was
thought it
like,
was okay, but never followed it.
yeah, it was in the same time period when X-Files was popular and it had kind of the same vibe. There's something going on. You didn't really know ever what was happening. And yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe I should dig it up and watch it. There might be some real value there.
Well, someone asks a related question. Are there any interesting TV series that you've been watching lately that you've enjoyed?
Well, yeah, I have been watching a few just because, at the end of the day, I want to be passively amused sometimes. Okay, so that's why God made television. And I did see one series that was kind of interesting. It's a The Day of the Jackal, okay, which was a great movie when it was originally done out of the Frederick Forsyth novel. That was a good movie with, I think, Edward Fox played the Jackal, and it's well cast, well done, and accurate to the book. Okay, then they made a remake of that with Bruce Willis. We generally like Bruce Willis, but it wasn't up to the standard, in my opinion, of the original. No, the original is always the greatest. But now they have on, I forget which of these channels it's on. It's The Day of the Jackal. And I don't know any of the actors in it. And it was actually quite good. I saw the whole thing and it had some interesting twists. It's not a remake exactly of the original book. You haven't seen it, have you?
You recommended it, and so I've been watching on the treadmill, and I think I've got 3 episodes left. It's good. I didn't.
Yeah.
There's part of it where it grossed me out. I was just like, of course you had to go there, but you probably know what I'm talking about. But other than that, it was very good.
Yeah, it's not about the assassination of de Gaulle or something like that. But it's about a very competent professional hitman. Same theme, different details. But the problem with that movie is the problem with almost all these things. Like another current series that I'm watching uh, of a novel by Harlan Coben. It's that everything has an unbelievably large number of blacks in it. I got nothing against blacks, absolutely not. In fact, we even had a lot of blacks in our second novel, Drug Lord. Well, it's kind of natural you'd have a lot of blacks in that because they kind of control the street drug business. So nothing against blacks in media, but it's like we're overwhelmed with blacks everywhere in all the series, in all the commercials. Like you're sure that half of the world, half of the US, half of Europe is black. In fact, I saw a survey some time ago of Europeans that have not been to the US. They're convinced that the US is 50% black people. Well, yeah, because what do they know except what they see? And that's what it is. Anyway, the problem with this is that the kind of heroine, it depends on how much you like the anti-hero, who is the jackal, or dislike him. But the person who's fighting against him is a black woman, not a black guy even. It's a black woman. But this is taking place in Britain. And yeah, there are a lot of blacks in Britain, but everybody's black in the goddamn. All of MI6 are black people. Everybody. Well, not everybody, but almost. It's annoying and crazy and really stupid.
Yeah, it's just this, it's the woke, the DEI intersection in entertainment. It still shows up. It's not as bad in that show as it has been in a lot of stuff in the last 5 years, honestly. But
Yeah,
it's present.
yeah, it is. And it really ruins things because it takes a great element of realism out of it. And it distorts reality in so many ways. So it's annoying. Anyway, but that's what I've been watching. And that's the problem with almost all these television things today, quite
You
frankly.
can't really anything in the last 10 years is going to have a hint of it. Where they're trying purposely to inject diversity, but the last 5 years in particular have been just an overload. So
Yeah. So what are you going to do? Anyway, the Jackal's pretty good.
yeah,
I
I
was that.
recommend it. Okay, let's see. With all the wild optimism about this second Trump term actually making some headway on the deep state, with maybe coming into the FBI, Tulsi Gabbard, maybe RFK Jr., and all the effects on the culture wars, pulling back the DEI stuff that Trump's done so far, all the executive orders he's done. He asks, what's your prediction on how much they actually accomplish toward their ends, toward really rooting out the deep state, reorganizing the economy, to making America great again and the Trumpian vision? Like how successful do you think they'll be?
Well, I'm so happy to see that Trump is doing the things that he's doing so far. I mean, he's done a lot in 2 weeks or whatever it's been. So that's all dandy. But the deep state is fighting back and is going to. And anyway, the problem is this. It's that there have been attempts to do this in the past. I listened to a tape with Murray Rothbard, the greatest economist of recent years by far. And he was talking about the Nixon administration. Nixon, horrible person. But there were apparently a lot of libertarians around the Nixon administration. And they thought, we're going to change things. We're going to blah, blah, blah. And look what happened with Nixon. They wound up taking the dollar off the gold standard. Nixon did so many stupid and horrible things. It didn't work. And then when Reagan was in office, there were a bunch of classical liberals and conservatives and libertarians around the Reagan administration. And you remember they said, if not us, who? If not now, when? Well, yeah, and Reagan did some very good things. Okay, but there was no basic change. And that's when the national debt started really skyrocketing. It was under Reagan because they were borrowing all this money. So now with the wokesters and the ultra liberals and the Marxists deeply entrenched in all areas of society, much more than it was much more than the Reagan years. Are they going to be successful? Well, the good news is that Trump viscerally hates these people. That's wonderful. I mean, it's personal for him. So maybe he won't drop the ball. He'll keep rolling. And some of the people that he's got seem, but I remember, and this was during the Reagan years, there was an ex-football player named Jack Kemp, okay? And he was appointed the head of HUD, Housing and Urban Development. And he was supposed to do all these marvelous things. And you know what the guy did? He doubled the size of HUD, doubled it. Why? Because he was going to do good things with HUD, not stupid liberal things, good conservative things. I'm afraid that these people might wind up doing that. You got to abolish the damned FBI, abolish it, abolish education, not just cut it back and make it efficient. Well, I don't want an efficient government. I want the government to be horribly inefficient. It's got to be smaller and spend less. And Trump is talking about raising money through through duties. Well, that's not going to, anyway, I got high hopes. I'm hoping for the best. I really am. And we're so damn lucky that the Jacobins weren't reelected, because we would be fucked if Kamala had been back in office. But I don't think it'll work.
The big thing, this came up in a conversation you and I had the other day, that I'm concerned about is that Trump, it is personal for him. He's issuing all these executive orders. He's going right after it. He's going right after what he sees as the problem. And when he cut off this NGO funding, I thought that was amazing, perfect, exactly what you needed to do.
Exactly.
The problem is that at some point there's pushback. There already is. There are lawsuits filed. A federal judge put a stay on that. There's going to be a point where there's going to be a crisis point where whatever procedure that should entangle him, as they did during his first administration, comes up, a judge's court order or something, and he has to make a decision. Does he abide by that court order, or does he cross the Rubicon? Does he just say, you have no, constitutional authority over me? But there's an argument he can make there. But as soon as you do that, as soon as you cross that Rubicon, I think everything changes.
I think you're right, because Trump is ruling, in effect, by executive orders, and it's understandable, because the Congress is so worthless and dysfunctional. He's got executive orders. But this is really exactly the same thing that happened when Rome turned from a nominal republic into the Principate, the empire. Still looks like the republic, kind of, but it wasn't, because Augustus was ruling by executive order, in effect.
Right. The Senate was still there, right?
Senate was still there, right? Exactly. And here's something that nobody's thinking about, I'm afraid. It's that when the financial collapse happens, financial and economic collapse, two different things, the American people are going to say, this is horrible. It's all, our standard of living is collapsing, do something. And somebody's going to present themselves with some cockamamie plan that's going to sound good, and the Democrats are back in office. And they'll do the same thing. They'll use executive orders, except it's going to be very bad stuff. So,
right. And the precedent will be established. That's the problem.
Yeah. I'm afraid morning in America, which we have, only lasts 6 hours.
All right. Somebody was asking if you have any insights into the perception within Argentina about Milei, like how he's doing, like how do normal people and businesses in Argentina, how do they feel about how he's doing and the progress he's making?
Well, I go back to Argentina a lot. Spent a lot of time there last month or the month before, because I got an apartment there and I live there part of the time. Here's the story. I mean, I don't know. It's not like I wander around the streets and interview people in Spanish, because my Spanish is not capable of an intelligent conversation. But one thing I can tell you is that prices in Argentina have skyrocketed. That you can forget about, a really good $5 meal in Buenos Aires anymore. They're American prices now. Prices have skyrocketed in Buenos Aires. So inflation stopped, but I think it's going to be a story with a happy ending, because I believe in economic reality. And unlike the Trump administration, Milei is economically sound and serious. I'm only disappointed that he hasn't defaulted on the Argentine debt to the IMF. He just says, hey, nothing personal. Yeah, maybe we'll pay it someday, but we can't right now. No, hay plata, don't have the money. Sorry. But instead he's paying it off and going back to them. What the hell's going on in his mind? But I'm optimistic in Argentina, but it's expensive now. It's not a cheap country anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big change. I've seen a lot of people complaining about that online. Okay, so next question is Trump overplaying his hand diplomatically? Yeah, it seems that the big stick is aimed at all countries. And it was last night, he had another tweet or a post on Truth Social talking about the BRICS countries. He said, the idea that BRICS countries are trying to move away from the dollar while we stand by and watch is over. We're going to require a commitment from these seemingly hostile countries that they will neither create a new BRICS currency nor back any other currency to replace the mighty US dollar, or they will face 100% tariffs and should expect to say goodbye to selling into the wonderful US economy. They can go find another sucker nation. There is no chance that BRICS will replace the US dollar in international trade or anywhere else. And any country that tries should say hello to tariffs and goodbye to America.
What is Donald smoking? I mean, the US has a gigantic balance of trade deficit, closing in on $1 trillion per year. Okay. Why might that be? Because the dollar is accepted around the world. We print up dollars in effect and ship them abroad, and those nice foreigners ship real goods into the US. And of course, he wants that to continue. Okay. But these nice foreigners really aren't that stupid. So how can he make other people accept this depreciating fiat currency? How can he force them to do that? And putting on tariffs in a world which has vastly, vastly more trade by any parameter you want than was the case during the 20s and the 30s when the Depression hit, in good measure because of tariffs on both sides. Because, you raise those tariffs, and a country that can, I mean, sure, he got around with bullying Colombia. Okay, got away with that. But they'll tariff back, and it's going to be an economic disaster, and people don't want to accept the dollar because they don't want to be stuck with holding the old maid card, a depreciating fiat currency. So this shows that Donald thinks he can bully the world. He thinks the US is much stronger and not as bankrupt as it is. Now, this is idiocy on his part. As much as I appreciate the fact that he was elected, it's dangerous idiocy.
Yeah, and it's almost like it's such an unreasonable demand. It's like the left in America demanding that we get that no one be allowed to own guns. If you try and defend yourself, if you have the right to defend yourself, then you're probably a criminal. And these are like the right of these countries to be able to trade with each other in the way that they want is not, it's not up to us. It's not up to us.
No, you can't impose your wishes on other people. And that's what he's trying to do. It's crazy, and it's absolutely not going to work. It's going to work. It's going to turn into likely a disaster, but at a minimum, a big embarrassment for Trump.
I mean, it's comments like this, though, that it's not dissimilar from, I mean, he hasn't taken the action yet, but it must be as scary to other countries as much it shows them that we are unreliable and that the dollar cannot be trusted as seizing the Russian gold or the Russian reserves.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
dangerous. It's actually going to do the opposite of what he wants. If you want people to use the dollar, you got to make them feel like there's no risk to using the
Yeah.
dollar.
Yeah. How about making it a stable currency instead of forcing people to use it while you're printing it up by the trillions, because he's going to be spending money like a drunk sailor on forgetting about Doge, on the stuff he wants. In fact, on this AI thing, what is it? What is this $500 billion called?
Stargate.
Yeah, it's unclear to me. How much is the US government going to put up part of that money?
No, that was supposedly all coming from private investors.
Ah, well, okay, if they want to do that. But I don't see why the US government is even involved in it. If they are, I don't know.
I think he was just trying to show it as like a look at all the money because he also bragged about Saudi Arabia apparently going to do hundreds of millions of dollar investment in the US too. So I think it was like him just trying to take credit. See, look what I'm bringing to America.
Yeah, this is dangerous. Lots of smoke and not enough fire. Anyway,
I wonder if if you have a lot of tariffs, it does make things more expensive, but it also discourages spending. So it has a doesn't it have a kind of a deflationary component to it too? Like if you know what I mean? Like if everything is much more expensive, won't people just buy a lot less? I mean, would that have a deflationary effect or no?
yeah, well, maybe. I always try to look at the bright side, of course. It's just the way I am. Always like to look at the bright side. And so people will consume less. And one of the things that I find most disturbing about the way America's evolved in the past few generations is Americans are termed consumers. They always use this term consumers. What a stupid term. I mean, why don't you call them producers instead, or savers instead, or asset builders? But they're consumers, which makes them, so yeah, so tariffs will reduce consumption of
It does in
important.
Uruguay, right? I mean, we see
Yeah,
it here.
yeah, it's makes stuff so expensive nobody can afford to consume. But Uruguay's a pretty poor country,
Yeah.
so it's
But
it's real.
Would
Trump,
that
Trump,
would that is it possible that that might offset some inflationary stuff that could be happening in the US?
well, if Americans start producing the stuff that they're now importing from the Chinese and other people, but will they? So are we going to build a massive uh, running shoe and t-shirt industry? Uh, well, probably not. I mean, we could if there were no taxes and no regulations. The infrastructure in the US is so good. Yeah, labor costs are higher, but the other things would offset it. But they can't. So there will be less actual production of stuff. And are they really going to improve the quality of US cars, which are very expensive and actually pretty crappy? I've decided I don't want to buy another new car ever, frankly. I don't want all the computers on the things, which make them, believe it or not, unreliable and glitchy and extremely expensive to repair, generally speaking. And you forget about doing it yourself. That ain't going to happen. So are they going to change the automotive industry domestically? Well, the government doesn't belong in any of this stuff. The smartest thing he could do is just deregulate massively, 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 and do things to make the dollar sound again. That'll solve the problem insofar as it's soluble.
Hmm. Okay. Doug, have you spent significant time in Patagonia? And if so, what do you think about that as a plan B destination?
Well, I have, but not all of Patagonia, because it's a giant area that's like empty, arid plains. There's nothing there. I mean, it's like it's like going to the middle of Kansas without the wheat or something like that. It's just, it's windblown. It's nothing. But the parts of Patagonia that people like are the foothills of the Andes up against the Chilean border. That is really world-class beautiful. And I've spent a lot of time there. Uh, Very nice, delightful. Uh, so it's wonderful. So what was the
So
question?
as a plan B destination.
Oh, yeah, you're kind of isolated. I mean, uh, Bariloche is in Patagonia. It's a pretty big city. It's a holiday resort. Must have 500,000 people. I like, there's a place called Villa Angostura, which is a really ritzy upmarket area for, wealthy Argentines that have a second house. My favorite is San Martin de los Andes, which is like a Bavarian village. It's the Lake District. Everything's got a lake there. Lakes are big, like beautiful Bavarian style lakes. It's wonderful. The answer is yeah, I think it's going to do really well.
Next question. Since China's DeepSeek has rocked the tech world, and even with the speculation that it has repurposed some ChatGPT tech, as well as NVIDIA, what do you see as some of the knock-on effects to the arrogant Americans and the lazy, complacent tech sector?
Well, it's kind of the question. It's a good question, but it kind of is saying that you remember IBM used to have this motto, we think, they work. That was their motto for a while, I think. We think, they work, which kind of implies that the Chinese are stupid, which they're not. I mean, people that have done intelligent IQ surveys, genetically, the Chinese have like a racial IQ of about 105 as opposed to about 100 for us Caucasians. So they're really not, just coolie laborers. So ChatGPT, listen, my computer skills are, let's say, substandard. I'm not a computer guy. Forget about it. But I am a technophile. And it seems to me that since everything in technology doesn't just get better, it gets a lot cheaper, that it's inevitable that the costs of the things that have made NVIDIA a $3 trillion company or more, whatever it is now. Yeah, things are going to get cheaper as well as better. And the Chinese probably proved this with their
With DeepSeek.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple lessons there. Well, I mean, one is that the notion that, oh, yeah, the Chinese might be smart, but they can't invent anything. That is disproven by this. I think very clearly they were very inventive in figuring out a way around constraints, that is what invention is. I mean, that, got a set of constraints. How do I come up with a totally new approach? So I also think that it is probably a wake-up call to the AI companies in the US who spent too much time making sure that their models were woke. They were artificially making them retarded, actually. So worried about that they figured they had enough time because they had more capital. And I think this woke them up.
Yes, and there's really no wokeness whatsoever in China or in other places in the world. So the U.S. has really shot itself in the foot in a big way there. So
yeah, one of the positive things though is because DeepSeek made it open source, everyone in the world, including the U.S. tech companies, benefit from the innovation, that's when science is done best, is when new technology allows like a step up for everybody.
And this meme that floats around where the Chinese steal stuff from us and have a big advantage from stealing stuff. Well, wait a minute. Is that really true? Or is that just a meme that's being floated by backward and failing US tech companies? Maybe they're forgetting that out of the students that take STEM in the US, a huge number of them are people from China and the Orient. So these aren't American students. American students have been taking, easy pass courses, like taking English and bullshit history and, soft subjects like that. And the guys that are actually using the labs in college, they're all from China, in addition to the fact that China every year is producing 5 or 6 times more STEM guys that we have. And they're serious STEM guys, in addition to the fact that half of our STEM graduates are Chinese also. So this stuff about Chinese stealing stuff, it's just not true.
Well, if I,
Well, sure they steal stuff. Everybody steals stuff if they can get away with it.
well, if I recall, in the, before the U.S. declared independence over Great Britain, one of the big problems was that there were patents that were being violated by Americans to reproduce the manufacturing processes in Britain. We were stealing patents.
Yeah.
It's almost like what you have to do. It's like we say, no, we own all these ideas, and you are not allowed to benefit from these ideas. Instead, you have to buy from us. That's a
And,
cartel move.
and worse than that, the US is trying to embargo the export of US technology to China. And what's the result of that going to be? Well, the Chinese are big and rich. They'll say, okay, can't buy that stuff from the Americans. We'll do it ourselves and we'll do it better.
Yep.
So
Not only,
the US government, as usual, shoots the US economy in the foot.
yep, and not only that, I mean, I would say that DeepSeek is a direct result of the artificial constraints that were placed on it by the export ban to China. They were trying to figure out how to do it with chips that were throttled, basically, and they came up with an inventive way around it. So, if you put pressure on creative, enterprising people, they're going to figure out an innovative way around it, and then your market, your monopoly gets destroyed.
I have to say here, I like to emphasize this, but I don't emphasize it enough. Our enemy is not the Chinese, it's not the Russians. Our enemy is the US government on every basis. Our standard of living, our risk of war with foreign countries. The enemy is Washington, D.C. and the US government as an institution. It's not a question of getting good guys in government. That doesn't happen to start with. And if they are somehow good guys, they're corrupted by the cesspool they have to swim in. The enemy is the government. That's the problem of all this stuff.
All right. Let's see. What are the likely implications for nations outside of the US and the Western system generally if Trump enacts his tariffs for things such as not doing business with the dollar?
Disastrous. Disastrous. We'll bully around some little countries. I mean, if Guatemala for some reason can't export bananas to the US, well, of course, we don't have any bananas. That's going to be inconvenient. And the Guatemalan banana crop will mostly rot, and it's a lose-lose situation. And that would
won't this just force BRICS to happen more?
Yeah, exactly. They'll think we're dealing with a lunatic. And if you have a lunatic out there, well, you try not to deal with them. You find alternatives because lunatics are dangerous. Like this thing with Colombia. Yeah, he got away with it. But after a while, Americans would find, oh, coffee's pretty expensive. But most of the coffee, well, comes from Vietnam, Brazil, and Colombia. But the best coffee comes from Colombia. So no more.
And this really is weaponizing the dollar at a whole other level. I mean, it makes you wonder, having dollars, for us, I have a Uruguayan bank account, I have US dollars, and I wonder if there'll be more restrictions in the future on the use of those dollars in some way. I don't know.
Yeah, we don't know, but it ain't going to be good. It can't be good.
Okay, so this guy says he shares a book that he found via Hans Hoppe. And the book is called Social Science as Sorcery. And he wonders if you've ever read it.
No, I haven't. But I'm a fan of Hans Hermann Hoppe. He's a very prickly guy, but that's on a personal level. We get along fine, but he's very Germanic. And when I first met Hoppe, I flew to Bodrum, Turkey, where he has his annual conference. very good conference, incidentally, with a lot of really good attendees. Anyway, I went there with Walter Block, who's an old friend of mine and was an old friend of Hoppy's. Well, anyway, this is kind of typical. Hoppy quite correctly calls out Walter for being, rabidly pro-Israel with all this stuff. I don't want to get into this whole thing. It's none of our business. But, it's, I'm a fan of Hoppy, notwithstanding the fact that he's, excommunicated Walter.
Well, he takes his principles very seriously,
Yes, he does,
Yeah.
which is good. And
Yep.
anyway, Hoppy's right and Walter's wrong. I mean, and I still love Walter, but Hans apparently doesn't. So
What do you think is going on with, well, the question is, if it's okay for the US to annex Panama or even just the canal and Greenland, is it therefore okay for China to annex Taiwan?
well, in the first place, it's not okay for the US to annex these places. So and, and annexing Greenland, okay, somebody's thinking, yeah, we ought to have more. But look, there's like 50,000 people in Greenland, okay? So if it becomes part of the US, what's really the benefit to the US? You can do anything in Greenland now, like mine stuff. It's not going to change if it becomes politically part of the US. People apparently are unaware of the fact that the Danish government pays an average of $10,000. It pays about $500 million a year to maintain Greenland. It's like Denmark's answer to Puerto Rico, which is a sinkhole for money for the US. Puerto Rico should be cut loose. I mean, it's just a costly, it's nothing. It's a drain on America, and Greenland's a drain on Denmark. And if you want to go mining there, yeah, you can go mining there, but there's something else that they've forgotten. It's that 100% of the land area in Greenland is owned. It's a very tribal society. I mean, I haven't been there, but I had a chance to go on a mining trip to Greenland, but I just passed. Maybe it was winter or something. But it's owned by the people. And if you build a house in downtown Nuuk, which I think is the capital, such as it is, the land is not yours. Your house is yours, but the land is not. It's all owned kind of in condominium or in co-op form, actually, like a New York co-op type form, by the collective. So what's the advantage to the Greenlanders to be part of America? Okay, is the $10,000 per person that Denmark is subsidizing him now going to be picked up by the U.S.? Yeah, I guess so. Are they going to be liable to U.S. taxes? I don't know if they're liable to Danish taxes now. That's something I don't know.
Well, they don't have many sources of income there, so it's probably not. They probably don't have to worry about that.
No, they don't. They got a couple of U.S. air bases and not much. And Panama is part of Colombia, and we stole it from Colombia, fair and square. I mean, bought it, in 1903. The way it worked was how did this work exactly? The canal zone. Well, first of all, the U.S. fomented a secession of Panama, that area, from Colombia. So it was a fomented secession, just like you might say the Donbass is a fomented secession from the Ukraine by the Russians. But ours was a good secession and Donbass was a bad secession. That's pretty obvious to all concerned. And then, but things were legitimate back in those days, more legitimate than today. So then we bought, fair and square, 5 miles on either side of the Panama Canal from the new Colombian government. But and the price was $10 million. Am I correct? Anyway, but at that time, the dollar was actually gold coins. So it was the amount, it was, how many ounces of gold was that? 500,000 ounces of gold. So it was a real deal. It was purchased from the newly minted Panamanian government. And then when the canal was built, the US had to buy the rights, which a French company owned, tried to build the canal, didn't succeed. So we bought those rights from them. And that was another like 2 million ounces of gold. And then we built the canal ourselves. I don't know who paid for it. The US government, I guess. I guess it must have. And that was like 10 million ounces of gold. So in a way, the US owns the canal's own fair and square. And it was stupid of Carter to give it back to Panama because we owned it. American taxpayers bought it.
Did he do that by executive order?
It's a good
Was it-
question. Be worthwhile looking into.
Yeah, I'll check it out.
Anyway,
Go
the
ahead.
US is an imploding empire where parts of the US, I think, are going to secede from the entity as Washington, D.C. and the country goes bankrupt in the future, and parts of it will break off. So, trying to accumulate more territory is like the Roman Empire trying to accumulate more territory in the 200s. It's pointless.
The only thing to me, it's Greenland and Panama sounds like even the talk around around Canada all seem like they're national security related, actually. Because, so it's like, it's the war state that really wants these things to happen. That's really driving that. And I think that goes, the whole America First idea, I don't know if that fits well within it, because it's about power projection. It's changing it to the hemisphere. It's like a throwback to the Monroe Doctrine.
Yeah, whenever they mention the word national security, I mean, look out. That's always a dangerous sign. And the fact that Trump kind of probably semi-seriously said we can annex Canada, that'd be a very bad idea, if only because Canada, the average voter up there is much more left-wing than the average American is. So that would really cement the Democrats in office forever, considering that Canada's much more of a welfare state than the US is.
Exactly. Yeah. So apparently there was a treaty that the 2/3 of the Senate ratified for the Panama Canal.
For Panama. So it was an official treaty. Okay, so it actually happened.
Yeah. So, Jimmy Carter everyone says Jimmy Carter, fool, gave it back. No, it was as legal as our acquisition of it was, I think.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. Well, we created Panama, took it away from the Colombians to make
That
it
part,
easier to do the
sketchy.
canal. And the canal turned out to be a good idea for all concerned. So, this statecraft is it's all crazy. I mean, and anyway, the Panamanians have actually run the canal since it was given back to them competently, and the cost per ton mile of ships that go through it has gone down under the Panamanians. And U.S. naval ships get to use the canal for free. So what's the area of complaint here? I mean, it's the Chinese. The Chinese,
It's the Chinese. This is all I think really all of it, even Greenland, you could argue it's against Russia, but I think all of it's about opposition to China. I think it all is. I think the Panama Canal is. I didn't understand this dimension about Canada, but Daniela Camboni had this guy on her podcast today that I watched, who is a reporter in Vancouver, and he basically has been following the China infiltration stuff and the money laundering that happens there through the casinos and through the fentanyl, and that there's a huge source of that coming into the US. And I had no idea the scale of it. All this, if you look at stats on it, they just talk about border apprehensions, but the Canadian US border is really open. I mean, lots of commerce happening there. And so apparently that although Trump hasn't really specifically talked about that part of it, but I think it's all relating to that actually. So all of this is seen as China is the ultimate enemy and like getting the strategic setup to be able to push back against China. The Panama Canal, I think Greenland too, through the Arctic, and then also Canada.
Maybe you're right on that. I hope he doesn't screw things up with Canada too much because they're a major exporter of wood to the US, which you use to build houses. So that's kind of shooting the US housing industry in the foot by doing that. And yes, I guess the US is a self-sufficient in oil and gas now, but it's very convenient to use Canadian oil and gas. So that's going to just screw things up if he tries to tariff that. I mean, these tariffs are a very, very bad idea. And yeah, in the early days of the US, it was the only source of income for the US government. All right, you can make that argument back then. If the US government is going to exist and needs taxes, which, okay, but this is now, not then.
And these are not economic, these are punitive. These are punitive. All of these tariffs are punitive in nature. 100% tariff for not using our currency or not basically swearing allegiance to it. I mean, it's a strange foreign policy tool. And I guess maybe if you would explain what the rationale is behind it, maybe it would be better. So we could at least like understand so he doesn't, but I don't.
Trump appears to think, even though he's going to wind up increasing spending, I think, on good things that he thinks are good, and he's going to pay for it all, make the foreigners pay for it all with taxes, which is a really stupid idea. Americans are going to pay for those taxes because the price of the he's going to wind up antagonizing broad swaths of people that live outside the US, destroying their industries and reducing the standard of living of Americans in the meantime. And it's just bad every way possible. All taxes are bad, but tariffs can be especially bad in a high trade world, which we have today.
Yeah.
They make enemies. I mean, really.
They make world wars.
World wars. And the US government and America is seen as unreliable and antagonistic. And instead of everybody loving America, everybody likes, the Beach Boys and apple pie and Chevrolets and the idea of I gotta hate these goddamned Americans, the way we were taught to hate Russians back in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s and today.
Yeah, it's interesting, dangerous, but interesting.
Dangerous.
All right, let's see if there's one more in here. Can I combine for you? Yeah. So, well, that's not a very good one. Let me find. Got to be one more in here. I'm not sure if I got the whole list or not. Oh, what would be a smart hedge or strategy against sanctions or tariffs for investors? I mean, let's put it this way. Is there something that we as investors need to concern ourselves with these threats of tariffs? I mean, obviously they can have a negative impact on particular companies. They can certainly reduce the profits of the companies we invest in, but are there other risks beyond that we should be aware of?
Well, the financial risks in the world today and the economic risks are huge, I think, much greater than they have been for many years. But these things, the tariffs and all this, increase the political risks tremendously. Therefore, you have to diversify politically. And if you're in a position to do so, you should diversify geographically and politically. That means you should have assets and a crib and whatever, maybe a citizenship or at least a residency permit outside the US. And if you're not in a position to do those things, well, why not? and if not, get into a position to do those things. But that's what you got to do. You got to politically diversify in a world like this.
Well, you set me up for a pitch, Doug. I have to say it. I don't know if you, we're doing a conference here, Plan B Uruguay conference, in March here in Uruguay. If you've ever been interested in understanding more about Uruguay, why don't you check it out? You might want to join us for this conference. So I will, if you go to crisisinvesting.com, you'll see a link for it with details about the event. And if you'd like to join us, that's how you do it. So that's a good way to get started on your Plan B.
Yeah, it is. And I think, well, maybe we can wind up bringing Argentina into that with Milei as well. So
Yep,
it's
certainly
kind of
talking about residency options there, and we can put
Yeah.
people in touch if they want to, like people should, if you're coming all the way down here at a side trip edition before or after, to go check out Buenos Aires at least and see what's happening.
Yeah, it's really a twofer. I can't think of two better countries to diversify into at the moment. There's other options, but I can't think of two better countries, actually.
That's why we're here.
Yeah, well, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, yeah, go to crisisinvesting.com. If you, and it's just, it'll be at the top of the page if you're interested, read more about it and sign up while you can. I think we'll wrap it up here for today, Doug, and we'll be back next week.
Yeah, this is a lot of fun, a lot of very good questions. So I'm pretty pleased, actually.
We'll get back into routine every Friday doing the questions again. They're fun. All right, Doug, have a great weekend.
Thanks, Matt. Same to you.